Good afternoon. Welcome to the UpSkill Works Forum series, where we engage business, education, and community leaders, policymakers, and leading thinkers on the key workforce issue our region and nation confront. I'm Peter Beard, and I lead the Greater Houston Partnership's UpSkill Houston initiative that serves as a regional backbone to bring together employers and business leaders, educational leadership, community-based organizations, and the public workforce system to strengthen the talent pipelines our region's employers need, and ultimately to help Houstonians connect to good jobs that increase opportunity and prosperity. And now just for a few housekeeping details. As you'll note, all attendees are muted and your videos are turned off for the entirety of the webinar, which we are recording. Please do not use the chat function for questions and answers. This will not be moderated for questions. The chat function can be used to connect to our production team if you're having any sort of technical issues. If you have questions or comments, you should use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. This will be moderated throughout today's session. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors of the 2021 UpSkill Works Forum series, Accenture, Silver Eagle, Winstead, HCA Houston Healthcare, Houston Community College, Lone Star College, Mustang Cat, San Jacinto College, Merrick, Dow, and Western Governors University, WGU, Texas. Thank you to our sponsors for your support of our UpSkill Works Forum series. I'd now like to introduce Mary Beth Gracie, who is the Houston Office Managing Director for Accenture, who will be introducing our session today that is focused on digital skills powering Houston's future. Mary Beth, welcome.
Thank you. Accenture is proud to partner with UpSkill Houston and support these virtual sessions that are on important workforce topics for the Houston region. And today's session is going to be very interesting as we explore the increasing need for technology and digital skills in Houston. As you know, Peter, Accenture is very interested in this topic, and it's one of the reasons that we created our Accenture Houston Innovation Hub to address the digital revolution that our companies and our city is experiencing. But for all our participants, I wanted to take a second to just set the stage for why this is so relevant for Houston. Did you know that Houston has the 11th largest technology workforce in the US? More technology workers than either Austin or Denver. And a few additional facts about the presence of our technology workforce in Houston, bringing us to this session. Houston has over 200,000 technology workers, including 152,000 computer, math, and engineering occupations. Houston has 9,290 tech-related firms, including more than 700 venture-backed startups. And we have organizations supporting tech startups, including co-working spaces, incubators, and accelerators, and nonprofit tech hubs. Our tech industry in 2019 contributed $29.2 billion to our region's GDP. So it's a very important topic, and we're delighted today to hear from Tom Ogletree. Tom is the Vice President, Social Impact and External Affairs at General Assembly. He'll be discussing General Assembly's approach to helping individuals and companies compete in this increasingly technological world and close the global digital skills gap that we are experiencing. So General Assembly, if you're not familiar with them, are known for their pioneering approach to education and career transformation with a focus on these in-demand business skills in coding, data analytics, project management, and digital design. And actually, General Assembly and Accenture have a long-standing relationship together. It began with a Data Academy partnership in 2017. We have numerous Accenture employees that have taken classes with General Assembly, and we're also expanding that relationship where there are more than 50 General Assembly graduates that have been hired for apprenticeship as well as full-time work at Accenture. So we're real excited about how our two companies come together to fill this digital skills gap. Today, Tom is going to share some strategies and approaches that Houston can use to empower low-income adult learners from these critical underrepresented communities to acquire digital skills and be able to pursue good careers in technology. I'm sure this will be a great and insightful conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing more about how we can work together to build the digital skills. And so, Tom, welcome to Houston virtually and to our UpSkill Works Forum.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth, for the really kind introduction. And we're incredibly proud of our work with Accenture throughout the world. And Peter, thank you so much for setting the stage for our conversation today. Really looking forward to digging in.
No, and Tom, we're excited to have you here, even though it's virtually, to share kind of General Assembly's approach to building the tech workforce that our employers need. So let me start with the overview question. What are the key trends you're seeing? And you can start with also just describing who General Assembly is, but what are the key trends you're seeing in the various occupations that require increased digital and technological skills?
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. General Assembly was founded 10 years ago, really coming out of the last economic recession, when there were a lot of folks who were seeing this rapid emergence of tech startups and traditional companies that increasingly were seeking digitally skilled talent, and there weren't a lot of opportunities for folks who were already in the workforce to be able to acquire a new set of skills to pursue careers in these sectors. So we were founded in New York City, and have still is our primary headquarters is still located in New York, where I'm based, and we built campuses like the one you can see in my virtual background, all over the country and all over the world, to kind of create a space and a hub where especially young people who are really curious about tech, who are often consumers of tech, could learn how to make their way into the fast-growing job opportunities in that space. I think where we've really evolved as a business is, we kind of have a two-sided marketplace. One, we're working with individuals who either want to, explore a new potential skill set, or to build their capabilities in disciplines like product management or data analytics. But we also do a work to help people who, have never worked in the industry completely pivot into a career in tech. That sort of became known in the media as coding boot camps, and it's still really a core part of our value proposition, where we work with individuals who are career changers to get them new skills and help them find jobs. The other piece of our marketplace is really working in-house at employers, many of whom on their surface may not look like tech companies. They're financial services, consumer packaged goods, media and telecom, but increasingly have the same need for digitally skilled talent as the Facebooks and Googles of the world. And so we go in-house to sort of help leaders drive digital transformation. And I think for us, being able to sort of see both sides of this talent marketplace has really given us a front row seat to some of the evolutions that have been happening as all companies are becoming, to one degree or another, tech companies. Digital skills are required for job categories, across sectors, across disciplines, and that there needs to be a really reimagining of the ways that people acquire new skills to stay relevant in a really dynamic labor market and a very rapidly changing economy. And that's where we really come in, both in terms of supporting individuals as they're making that transition, but also working with businesses who are grappling with those changes and how that's affecting their own operations and people.
So it feels like, in addition to kind of the digital trends you're seeing and this idea that almost any company is becoming a tech company at some level, it also feels like there is an appetite both on the employer side as well as on the individual learner side to be finding upskilling and reskilling opportunities. Because I think a lot of us, had some sense that, the half-life of skills was getting shorter and shorter, but it's good to hear from you that there's not only the commitment of individuals looking to do it, but employers kind of upskilling their incumbent workforce. Is that a trend that we should continue to see?
I mean, we hope so. I think that the reality is that, given and we see this in the talent shortages that are talked about in the labor market reports that we see every month, right? There's this huge gulf between, the folks who are looking for meaningful, rewarding work, and also the demand on the other side. And we sort of sit in the sort of the middle of this fundamental tension, where there just isn't enough qualified tech talent to fulfill the gaps that employers are looking to close within their own employee bases. And there isn't enough coming out of sort of traditional higher education to really meet that need, right? And so I think what we're seeing increasingly is both individuals who are saying, I'm ready to, and especially this was true during the pandemic. I love my career in the restaurant industry, but, I'm not seeing real opportunities for growth. My wages have been interrupted because of restaurant closures. I want to think about, a career that has more stability, that has more of a growth opportunity. What could that look like, right? And so I think we heard from a lot of students who are coming through our doors, those feelings of wanting something that felt more that had sort of longer term, potential in terms of career stability. And then on the flip side, businesses who, historically were very choosy about where they were, or very sort of specific about where they were seeking out talent, right, from certain types of universities or certain types of degree programs, are increasingly saying, how can I look inside at the sort of the loyal employee base who's been here and arm them with new capabilities so that they can help respond to my needs, but also how do I invest in new talent pipelines so we can broaden the overall pool of talent that is available. And I think we've been really intrigued and excited by a lot of the sort of multi-sector partnerships that we're seeing in cities like Louisville, Kentucky, or Buffalo, New York, as well as through the Microsoft Accelerate initiative, which is in Houston, that's really looking to say, how can the business community make these deep investments in folks who are located in their market to ensure that there's a really sort of resilient pipeline of talent that's not just sort of reliant on traditional higher education, which is also obviously incredibly important. We don't see ourselves as competitive to higher education or community colleges, but in this moment of massive transition for our economy and for businesses, across sectors, there need to be multiple interventions that can ensure that both, the new talent that's sort of coming into the market, as well as existing talent that's already in the market, can adapt to these sort of different kind of headwinds and tailwinds that are really reshaping the way that we think about skills in the world of work.
So, no, and that's helpful. And we're going to come back to an element of that a little bit later, because I know one of your strong commitments is around how do we create a more diverse and inclusive workforce that employers are looking for. But we'll come back to that. But you've described kind of what you do. So what are some of the outcomes that you've achieved if you had to kind of look back over the last 3 to 5 years? And the pandemic probably could have an asterisk noted to it just because it was probably challenging and difficult. But I mean, you've obviously built a reputation for delivering outcomes. So what are some of those outcomes that you're proud of that as you look back and then hope going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the real genesis for GA was really sort of moving away from thinking about education and training just through the lens of personal development, right? Or learning for learning's sake, which we also think is important, right? Many of our students are college graduates or have advanced degrees, and we really believe in the power of higher education and learning. But our really focus was on how do we make somebody ready for the job at the end of the training experience, right? And so a lot of what we became best known for is these coding boot camps, these programs where folks quit their job or they're out of work. They come to us all day, every day, either in person or virtually. They're learning live with other students. They're learning live from an instructor, and they're gaining an entire new set of skills over a 3-month period. It's an incredibly rigorous experience to have that kind of intensive engagement in the material. But we're big believers that that's a pedagogy that can be really effective in taking someone who's a relative novice in a field like software engineering or UX design and get them ready to be a hireable practitioner at the end of it. And for us, what the key features are not only just the rigor of the experience, but also that it's taught by industry practitioners, people who have worked in the field, who have experience, who can bring that context into the classroom. That it is very portfolio driven, so that students are working on the types of projects that they will be doing on the job once they graduate, and that they can demonstrate how those skills in the interview process through their own portfolios and their own demonstrated experience around doing that type of work. And then third, it's the career placement. We have a remarkable team of really talented career coaches who work with students over the course of the class to think about, how do you position your personal brand? How have you positioned your previous experience, whether it was working in finance or driving an Uber, to sort of make a case for yourself and your capabilities and readiness for the job. And then they work hand in hand with students after they graduate until that student gets a job, coaching them before interviews, helping with technical interview prep, connecting them to specific opportunities. And as a result, we have a really high placement rate that we're exceptionally proud of. 91% of our graduates, according to our last outcomes report, secured placement within 3 months of course completion, and close to 100% secure placement within a year, right? And so for us, that sort of ROI on the training is a really critical component of how we think about this work. Now, obviously, with the labor market the way it has been over the past year, those numbers are going to drop in our next report. But I think what we've seen is a real resilience in our students of sticking with it, even if they have to have a longer search time for a particular job. And we're seeing some really just remarkable trends in terms of growth and demand over the past few months that is a pretty rapid course correction that we're hopeful will continue. But I think that commitment to that career placement, I think is a kind of a key feature of what makes General Assembly attractive value proposition, both to the students who go through our programs, but also for employers who are saying, I need more talent and I need them tomorrow. And, I can't just rely on maybe some of the traditional hiring mechanisms that may have worked very well, 10, 20 years ago, but have maybe less, may not be able to sort of close those gaps in given the sort of dynamism of that need.
So, I'm kind of hearing 3 or 4 key differentiators in terms of what has led to that success. One, obviously, is kind of the focus on using practitioners to help teach the course so they provide those insights. One of the things we hear as we talk to employers is they want to have someone be able to demonstrate they actually can do some of the activities, whether it's cloud or other thing. They don't need to be masters of it, but enough to that the next, the much more specific job related stuff can be taught by the employer. This whole idea of career coaching and support to help people navigate what is probably a challenging labor market to figure out, like, what job, now that I've done this, what job do I get to? And those all are critically important, but I want to come back to something you started with in the very beginning, which is the 2 sides of the house, because one of the issues that we've tried to do in Houston is really to ensure employers are leading because they have the insights into the skills. How do you navigate ensuring that the employers and where you're going to be placing folks, because part of it happens on one side of the house and it may require specific outreach, to ensure that the curriculum gets adjusted to meet the evolving needs that employers are out there?
Yeah, it's if it were easy, a lot of other folks would be, I think we've learned that this isn't something that's very simple and straightforward, right? I think we're very attuned to the fact that, in addition to the fact that the needs are rapidly changing, different businesses and different industries have different needs. And I think being able to sort of think about how do you create a sort of set of baseline content that can get the right sort of, digital first mindsets in place, but also, prepare individuals with the necessary skills to be able to sort of, one, understand if they're a good fit for those types of roles, but then actually acquire the practical capabilities that can then show up and add value on the job is not something that just magically happens, right? So our product team spends a lot of time talking to employers, trying to understand their needs, looking at labor market trends, pulling apart those analytics, talking to the members of our standards boards who are industry executives who are helping us to sense make around what are the broader industry factors that could inform the type of curriculum that we need to develop. And then how do we continue to update, adapt, and evolve our own content to be responsive to those needs? Now, when we're doing these large scale digital transformations, we're also then building often customized curriculum or highly specific curriculum. But, the way that we see it is that gives us more data points about what the market is asking for, which can then inform what we're sort of offering to students who are coming through our doors. It's not always just a seamless, clean process, right? All of this is messy and complex and nuanced, but I think aspirationally, I think we really try to have that view where ultimately on both sides, the ultimate client is the employer, right? If the value proposition that we provide to students is that you're going to get a job at the end of this. So we need to make sure that whoever hires you is very satisfied with the person that they've brought on, right? And then the same side, when we work with large scale enterprises, we're trying to make sure that they're really seeing a return on investment on these sort of trainings and investments in their own people that take them out of work and reduce productivity in the short term, but hopefully can really add meaningful value in the long term, while also ideally building loyalty and a sense of connection to that business. So I wish it were an easier and cheaper process in many ways, but I think what we've learned is that just with the way that the labor market is heading, having this kind of like mindset and approach, and having a range of different education workforce and training providers, I'm sure many of whom are on this call and are grappling with the same sorts of questions that we do every day, are able to sort of start to create those connections between the talent that exists in the market and the needs of employers.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a critically important piece. And I'm going to come back to your curriculum piece there. And I want to remind folks to please put Q&A and the questions and answers. We want to be responsive to what's on your mind. But it feels like you probably engineer your curriculum in a way to ensure that as you talk to employers, when you understand these are the critical skills, these are potentially the breakdown points that we actually need someone to get past. And so you probably have a lot going on in how you design the curriculum to reinforce, because I mean, as we know, employers are known for like, I need the perfect unicorn to fit all of these requirements. When at the end of the day, there are only 4 or 5 things that are almost fatal. If you can't do those, you're not going to survive at that employer. How do you design the curriculum from that perspective?
It's a great question, and I am not an expert on learning science and curriculum design. I know enough to be dangerous, so I will hope that my colleagues who may have joined will forgive me if I speak out of turn. But at the end of the day, we recently released a report with MSD Burning Glass that really looked at sort of labor market data, and had our members of our standards boards, these executives from industry, sort of comment on some of the big trends that we're seeing across different industry verticals. And I think one of the tensions that we experience is something that you alluded to, which is, often, and this is especially true now, employers will ask for everything, right? They want they sort of put out the sort of like the kitchen sink ask for a particular, type of person, where in reality, there are a few core capabilities, exactly as you described, and the data backs this up, that are really essential. And some of these are, what some people call soft skills. We like the term employability skills, that are more around sort of like communication, project management, problem solving, collaboration, et cetera. And then there are the sort of the hard skill capabilities about, whether or not understand a particular tech stack or understand UX design principles, right? So I think for us, really sort of understanding the way that those two things play against each other is really critical. I think the other tricky thing is that, when it comes down to it, a lot of the things that are being branded as digital skills are actually not necessarily tech focused, right? It's just that the way that jobs are evolving in this really, historically, marketers were not required to be as data driven as they are today, right? So that just requires folks who maybe historically came from had a sort of a more creative or lens to sort of thinking about their profession, now have to be highly data driven and bring in some of those quantitative elements. Now, we're not talking about sort of advanced calculus here, right? But these are sort of areas of discomfort for some folks, understandably. It's hard to learn new skills as an adult. We know this, right? And so I think a lot of it too is really understanding how do we sort of understand what specific qualities individuals need, what competencies do they need, and then what are the skills that are sort of tied to those. And it's always I think, and for us, it's always balancing the tension between how do we be broad enough that we can sort of satisfy the majority of what folks are looking for, while recognizing that there may be a little bit more that needs to be topped up at the end to ensure that someone is ready for a specific role at a specific organization on a specific tech stack or within a specific set of frameworks. frameworks. But again, it's nuanced and pretty dynamic.
So, I mean, there's some really good questions, and they're breaking down into kind of 2 or 3 broad categories. One is really related to kind of this employer engagement. So I'm going to put those out on the table. Another is related to kind of how do people apply and finance, obviously a 3-month curriculum. And then there's the broader question of how do you partner with community-based organizations and others related to diversity? And I'll put them all out on the table, but that was where I was beginning to see kind of a breakdown here. And so there's really this idea of, how frequently, and you've probably kind of hinted at it, do you meet with employers to take the pulse? And do you do it kind of individually, or do you do it in a focus group setting, or what? So kind of what's that process begin to look like? And once again, you've got that one side of the house that's probably always, acknowledging that.
Yeah, I mean, we have a full product team who are working all the time, studying labor market trends, understanding what is sort of in demand in the marketplace. Many of them come from higher education or traditional education and are really bringing that mindset to thinking about what are the gaps that we're seeing, what are the jobs that we can train for in relatively short periods of time, what are the ones that require certifications or capabilities that are outside of our ability to sort of effectively deliver. So there is a whole team that's really sort of thinking about this at General Assembly day in, day out, and tweaking and adapting and modifying our existing content to make sure that we're staying abreast of where the trends are going, or what demand is increasing and what is decreasing. The other reality is that when we're working with on site on a client, we have folks who are typically there physically, day in, day out, working hand in hand, every single day, if we're delivering a 1-week-long, immersive program on data for leaders, right? We're seeing all the exit tickets from the participants. We're regrouping with our stakeholders on site to understand how we can make sure that anything that went really well that day is incorporated into what happens the next day, and anything that didn't go as well as we wanted to is addressed in whatever capacity. So there's just a ton of kind of like real-time communication and feedback, and that requires just investment in infrastructure internally within our business to make that possible. And so I think if there are sort of specific actionable questions that people have, I think that the reality is that that's going to be challenging for a community college or local nonprofit, right? And so I think, this is where too, and that's maybe a nice seg, is that, we've been able to sort of do this at a very high level, internationally, with a lot of our partners. But when we're doing programs through, like we're doing with the great folks at Baker Ripley here in town, with the folks at the ION through the Microsoft Accelerate program, really being able to bring our kind of experience and scale and history of working with large scale employers, and then be able to team up with organizations who know their communities, who know the individuals that they're serving, who understand the local labor market dynamics, and sort of help sort of add more value to the stack that already exists of regional employers who are sort of grappling with their own sort of like workforce demands, and community-based organizations that are serving audiences that may historically have been underserved or overlooked by the higher education system, or haven't had the sort of access or connectivity to these types of fields and jobs, is something that is a huge value add for us, and hopefully takes some of the burden off of those organizations to have to build their own essentially research and development shop to sort of really go deep into what the sort of regional employer demands are looking for.
So, I mean, and that kind of gets into this second set of questions, which is, how do you price your courses and services? And then there's kind of the financing question, which is, do students apply to FAFSA? Do employers invest in them through their kind of remitted tuition approaches? And I also know you use a tool called the income share agreement, which is a different way to kind of help individuals finance their work. So once again, pricing for it, and then, how do you finance that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is those 500-hour courses, which in some ways is almost as many classroom hours as you might have in a semester or even a year of traditional higher education. They're not cheap, and so right now on the market, they're priced at $15,000, and that's a big investment. And when I joined General Assembly 6 years ago, almost all of our students were, college educated career changers that had the means or the access to be able to afford that. And so we've been thinking about affordability a lot, over the course of my tenure at the company. So, we've run a number of different scholarship programs and partnerships. We were recipients of two of the tech hire grants that came out of now 2 administrations ago, which helped to sort of underwrite the cost through some partnerships that we did with workforce nonprofits and community colleges. We've partnered up with companies like Adobe, who have built entire, digital academies that are focused on bringing, members of underrepresented groups into Adobe's tech ranks by fully subsidizing the cost of the program, and coupled with living stipends that then lead to paid apprenticeship opportunities at Adobe. And that's a model that they've had a ton of success with, and are they have put together a wonderful playbook that we're happy to share with this group, that they are always eager to encourage other companies to replicate. We also have financing options that you would see at any kind of school. Payment plans, loans. We're not eligible for federal financial aid, nor do we want to be, given the sort of the historical track record of schools like us becoming eligible and then having it really be sort of focused more on enrollments than outcomes. And we really want to make sure that outcomes is the sort of the measure on which we're evaluated. And we are testing new sort of innovative financing options that are still, there's a lot of sort of uncertainty from a regulatory perspective around income share agreements. We're really happy and proud of our program, but have seen kind of mixed reviews from consumers given the lack of sort of existing frameworks. But I also think we're very aware, and our new our CEO Lisa Lewin, who joined the company a little over a year ago, has really been clear to us that we need to find ways to sort of lower our cost of delivery without sacrificing quality, because in most parts of the world, the notion that individuals take on debt to pay for education is just not something that's very well understood, or seems very incompatible with what most education and training opportunities look like in Western Europe and in Asia Pacific. So I think that's something that we're grappling with constantly. But and I think one of the things that we've really seen what we've seen time and time again is that ability to pay has no relationship whatsoever with likelihood of securing an outcome, nor does prior educational attainment or past work history, right? We have, some of our top students and our top performers, are not folks who couldn't afford college, or, took some credits but didn't complete, or, who have been working in fields that were, often not seen as adjacent to tech, whether that's, hospitality or retail or food services, but when given the opportunity, are, phenomenal in our programs and get great jobs that are really able to sort of increase their incomes and their family incomes and really kind of get that next rung up on the economic ladder, which is something we always love to see.
And one of the questions obviously comes from Baker Ripley, who you've been partnering with, which feels like they're kind of a catchment or a recruiter that brings folks in. So it'd be interesting for you to describe generally, how do you partner with community-based organizations to create that diversity? And then linked to that, it feels like, how do you ensure, and it goes back to the question we were talking about, how do you ensure that there's adequate kind of career preparation to go, like, you're about ready to come down this path, and here's things you need to be considering, to your point, to make sure you're successful? Because that feels like it gets linked to the outreach to then help people navigate and understand before they, plop down whatever, thousands of dollars in order to take the course.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is something we grapple with all the time, right? Because the reality too is that, these fields are not for everybody. Right. It's, I would not be a very good software engineer myself, right? Personally. But, I think what we've really done is sort of demystify the notion that you need to go to certain kinds of schools or have certain types of connections to be able to pursue a career in these disciplines, right? And so much of our own sort of admissions and awareness building process is around orienting people towards, what is this? What are the careers like? Do you like doing this? Is this a good fit for you? Right. when we did a program with Real Jobs Rhode Island, one of our successful sort of like funnels into the program was a program called Road Coders, which was a free program at the local libraries run by volunteers. It was very introductory coding principles. Some people tried it, were like, that's cool. I know a little bit more about this type of technology that everybody's talking about, and I'm happy to have the experience, but this is not something I want to like spend my work life doing, right? And that's okay, right? And so we try to create those kind of like low barrier to entries opportunities to really engage, so that people can sort of self-select if they feel like it's a good fit given their own what they like doing and what their professional aspirations are, right? And I think for us, setting those expectations too on the front end around what does it mean to be in a program where you're in class all day, every day? We now have teams of student experience folks and social workers who help folks where, how do you not think about childcare if you're responsible for other adults in your household? What does that look like? How do you think about what other sort of resources may be available to you, either through the public benefit system or local workforce, et cetera, that could sort of help make sure that you can dedicate your time and attention to the training so that you can have a successful outcome on the back end. So, to your question about Baker Ripley, I think it's really about understanding who are you serving, what are you trying to accomplish, and then what role can we play to help you achieve that goal. Right. And I think what Baker Ripley has been, they've been really fabulous at helping us to say, okay, we don't think that your programs are going to be a perfect fit for all of our constituents, but we want to create spaces for you to introduce a lot of these fields to folks. And so maybe they say, yeah, maybe this isn't the right thing for me right now, but in the future, this is something that could be kind of cool for me to think about. Right. But there are going to be another audience of folks who are say, hey, I'm ready. Like, I want to do this, put me in it. And so they'll go through our sort of screening and assessment process, and then the cost of the program is fully subsidized, right? So the participant will pay nothing, though they will obviously have to contribute a significant amount of time, right? Which is also really valuable. And I think what we will really partner with what we've talked about a lot with Baker Ripley is, one, how do we sort of provide the wraparound support so that people are set up for success if they have other things in their life that need attention, right? Which is the reality for most adult learners, but especially folks who may not have a lot of a big, a lot of cash stored up in the bank, or a huge safety net that can just kind of like swoop in to sort of address life situations as they come up. And then also, how do we sort of create that connectivity to employers so that, the great relationships that Baker Ripley and other, community-based organizations have with folks in the market can sort of start to introduce and also create that connectivity for talent who may not have, some of those like traditional signals that employers are looking for, like a 4-year degree, but have, incredible demonstrated skill capabilities and talent that they can, bring to bear. If afforded the opportunity to sort of demonstrate their own talent.
And so it feels like, partnering with kind of community-based organizations helps kind of create a certain pipeline where we probably need to think about segmentation in a good way. Yes. To make sure people are getting exposed. They get the career tryout that I think you described with shorter term programs. There have been a couple questions which I think are kind of related to, do you partner with other educational institutions? Because obviously you're, a great education and training provider. Obviously you're doing it with employers, but there were a couple questions that I think we're hinting at. Do you partner in many respects to kind of fill the gap that, to your point, some institutions are not going to have the same bandwidth and capabilities you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are always eager to and actively exploring partnerships. We've done some programs with LaGuardia Community College and CUNY here in New York. We are exploring a number of different articulation agreements with traditional higher education organizations. I think one of one of the big aspirations that I have is, finding a model wherein people who are already sort of pursuing, either an associate's or bachelor's degree program could get credit to take a GA program towards that degree, or that, some of our students through specific university partnerships could say, oh, I completed a GA program that gets me on the road towards X number of credit hours towards my associate's or my bachelor's. I can then, seek out work and, start making money for myself and for my family, while over time at my own pace be able to sort of complete that credential if that's something that's important to that individual. So, I mean, I think we're also very tuned to the fact that, no one organization is going to address these big complex problems, right? We need sort of higher ed, we need the community college system, we need the workforce system to also be playing a role in sort of helping our whole economy sort of shift into this new way of thinking about talent and talent development. And so, I think we're also hopeful that some of the things that we've learned and tested and also have done unsuccessfully can be sort of tools and blueprints for other providers who are trying to figure out how they show up in the world. I mean, I think I teach a graduate school class in addition to working in General Assembly, and I'm very tuned to the fact that traditional higher education institutions are really grappling with the way that they show up in the world and show up for students. So I think this is something that is a set of questions and challenges that is being navigated both by employers and by education and training providers alike. And I think that we have a kind of a window and a sort of a set of theses about how those can be sort of adopted by other institutions, but we also recognize that we certainly don't have the scale or the reach that UT does by any stretch. So are going to need those institutions too to kind of be playing a role in kinds of moving in that direction.
No, and that's really helpful. And so you've kind of raised this question, which also showed up, and I think folks were interested in the study that you did with Burning Glass or MZ, and really, how do we kind of continue to get that kind of data in front of folks so that they can both advise and counsel, but also adjust their programming?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm happy to share it. I need to maybe my colleague Gabby can pull it up and share in the chat. But I think we're always trying to sort of understand. We 5 years ago teamed up with Burning Glass to sort of talk about the rise of hybrid jobs, right? The notion that the marketing folks were over here, the analytics folks were over here, the designers were over here, and the tech people who built the products were over here, and that was changing, and that these fields were really merging in really dramatic ways, so that tech people needed to understand design people and vice versa, right? And I think that's really come to fruition and has become increasingly kind of understood and appreciated. And so, and now I think we're trying to push towards, okay, what are we seeing in the market now, and what are the trend lines taking us in terms of what the future state is going to be, so that we can think about how that informs our own programming, but also how we could sort of help employers get ahead of some of those challenges. And I think that MZ Burning Glass in particular is doing some really terrific work on this, as are a number of other think tanks and I would name Aspen Institute and Brookings in particular are doing some really fabulous research on how cities can think about how they become more resilient from a talent perspective, or how sort of career coaching and navigation can help people who are trying to make their way in an increasingly uncertain dynamic labor market. So I think we always try to we make that connectivity between the folks who are sort of thinking that the very, very big picture, and then what we're seeing in very granular ways on the ground.
Oh, and I think you raised a couple of really good points. One is, I think I've seen because they've merged, I'm not sure which one it is, Burning Glass or MZ did the study on hybrid degrees. To this point, there are disciplines in different parts of a institution of higher education that employers are going to want more integrated. And then as we've worked with our own employers, and this gets to the data analytics question, is they want to upskill folks that already know their business into data analytics. They don't want to hire a data analytics person to then try to teach them the business. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing that more and more, where you are seeing companies like Guardian Insurance, who are recognizing that their actuaries need to have Python and predictive analytics capabilities to sort of make the most of their own sort of data, right? And so I think that and I'll cite another paper that I can share is that we did with Josh Burson, who's a really well-respected HR industry analyst, on the build versus buy approach to talent, right? How do I make investments in the people I already have to help them to sort of take their existing knowledge of our business, our operations, our culture, and make them more sort of fit for purpose for the types of tasks and roles that I need accomplished, rather than saying I'm going to go out to the market and find net new talent that can sort of accomplish those things. And I think that it's going to be a constant tension that I think is going to just continue to sort of prove out that the way that we think about how we get skills, how we stay relevant in the labor market, how employers find talent, what that looks like, is gonna continue to just stay very, very dynamic in a way that it has for the past few decades.
No, and we kind of opened, and there's a question in here related to apprenticeship programs. And as you know, you shared that Accenture has its own apprenticeship program, and you're helping to feed that pipeline. But in many cases, there are community colleges that are running apprenticeship programs and having coalition of partners. Have you partnered in that context?
And one thing that I think I grapple with around the concept, the whole idea of apprenticeship, is there's the sort of the capital A apprenticeship, the Registered Department of Labor apprenticeships, and sort of like lowercase a apprenticeships, which is like what we have with Adobe, where there's a learning opportunity that's paired with a learn on the job opportunity that's typically paid, that hopefully results in a full-time job. And I think we've seen much more traction with the lowercase a apprenticeships than we have with the kind of capital A apprenticeships, because I think that, and this is not a criticism, but I think that the workforce system is still really sort of kind of like grappling with these seismic implications that are on a very kind of like national and global scale, given that so many sort of workforce, so much of our federal workforce infrastructure is so localized, right? So how do we sort of plug into some of these macro trends that are playing out? So I think, my hope is that there continues to be awareness, especially from employers, on the value proposition of sort of pairing the learning opportunities with on-the-job learning opportunities, and that can be something that can really be seen as, a way to rethink some of the barriers to entry that a lot of talent face, particularly when going for jobs in these types of fields and sectors, right? Where often just getting past that screening, doesn't give you the opportunity to really demonstrate your capabilities and competencies, because you don't check a certain box.
And I think we're going to, and you may be tracking this as well, but I think we're going to see an emergence of almost an intermediary staffing kind of firm that provides that kind of experience. I think there's an organization called Tectonic out of Denver that, recruits folks, they're doing specific projects, with clients, and then they turn those individuals client facing to say, you can now acquire these talent because you've seen, one, they can work, two, they've built the skills. And so I think, this idea of a staffing firm that provides kind of that entry level set of experience is probably going to show up more and more as we go forward.
Yeah. We work with a wonderful group called Interact that is based out of Louisville. They put students through from West Louisville, which is a historically very underserved neighborhood community. Put them through our training program and then move them onto their client projects, with blue chip firms. And I think what they're able to do is take folks who may have never considered themselves to be technologists, give them a training experience, put them on a team where they're not client facing on day one, but are getting that kind of mentorship and coaching, and then working their way up the ladder in a way that they can sort of bill out affordably to the client. And I think those types of innovations are what, I think we're hoping to see more and more that the current administration really makes meaningful investments in, that we also continue to see more and more, mayors and governors who are, I think, in many ways leading the charge on a lot of the innovation that's happening in this space, to create the conditions where that you can sort of de-risk it both for individuals and employers.
No, and I think that makes sense. And once again, I'm trying to take the questions and broaden them out in some respects. There's this idea that you've been working with individual employers, and have you worked with consortia? And I'm going to kind of build the curriculum, assess needs, and build the pipeline into that consortium of industry or businesses. And, here in Houston, one of the challenges we're going to have, as we think about the energy transition, the fact that we've had an energy downturn, is a lot of our energy mid-career professionals are going to need to reskill in a different way. And I know in Calgary, they have a program that's I don't know whether it's General Assembly-esque. It feels like it's like General Assembly, but it's a 3 to 6 month training program focused on, project management, software development, and, data analytics. And, it feels like we're going to have that challenge with our mid-career professionals that have been displaced, and how we're going to help them find that next mile of training to get to a different kind of job, as well as manage their expectations, because they're probably not going to go back into the industry. They're probably not going to start at a salary that they were used to, but it's still going to be a good salary. Are you seeing those trends right now?
Absolutely. And I think one thing that I would like to see more of, we're doing a lot of work with John Deere, where they're both taking people who are already existing in their sort of tech, ecosystem, and giving them a whole new set of skills and capabilities, right? Taking folks who are sort of like IT help desk professionals and helping them become software engineers, but also folks from other parts of the business whose jobs have become increasingly redundant, and they're making meaningful investment in the capabilities of these individuals and then moving them into these new roles. And I think, we are, I think that there is a lot of risk for folks who are, still have 10 to 20 good working years in them, but who may be, facing sort of redundancies within their specific, job functions or roles, and that it's incumbent on the public sector, the private sector, the social sector to really respond to that, to ensure that folks who have the capability to make those pivots later in one's career have the ability to do so just as much as those who are maybe career changers in their late 20s, early 30s. So we are seeing some of it, but certainly not at a scale that I think is necessary to kind of address the underlying issue.
And a related question to that, once again, it's probably a little more specific, but it's relevant in light of what's happened with, kind of our exit from Afghanistan, is we're going to have kind of a refugee community, some of which are probably highly skilled. And what are the opportunities to think about how do we, organizations that are, working with refugees or folks that are coming in that have, good skill sets, but aren't probably, Harvard educated or MIT educated or even, A&M educated. How do they, how can we look at that from kind of that population that's coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this a lot. We're part of the Tent Partnership for Refugees, which Tent's a really fabulous organization that was created by the founder of Chobani Yogurt, who's a refugee himself, around sort of like creating pathways for refugees into meaningful work. And we've already started hearing from folks who have been resettled to the United States, who have credentials in their home countries, have skills that are transferable, but typically may only be seeing opportunities for more kind of like low wage jobs in the short term. And so I think we've had some success in helping folks who may not have a credential that's recognized in their home country, but is not in the United States or Great Britain or Canada, top up their skill set so that they can sort of make that smooth transition into a similar type of field or role, in their new country. I think it's going to be, but I think at the end of the day, the reality is that the demand is going to be more than can be met by the net new talent that's coming out of the traditional higher ed system, right? And so being able to sort of look at other populations, whether that's mid to late career professionals, refugees who are or new Americans, there's enough demand where all of these types of profile, parents who are thinking about return to the workforce after staying home to care for a child, veterans, and former service members, these are all audiences that employers should and can be looking at, to sort of help close some of those gaps. And I think that by thinking more broadly about how do these sort of investments in talent, one, sort of like reduce the friction that currently exists within the labor market, given the demand for these types of opportunities, but also sort of create more pathways into sort of economic mobility for folks who need it most is I think something that we should all aspire to support. And it's always it's easier to say than it is to do, but I think I'm always pleased to see and just in the chat here the way that people are really grappling with these issues and how it shows up within their organizations, their companies, their communities, etc., that can help sort of tackle some of these broader systemic issues issues that no one organization or individual can address single-handedly.
So as we bring this to a close, Tom, I'm going to kind of flip the tables on you, but is there a question we should have asked you that we didn't, that you really want to kind of tell us about, or is there a question you have for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is we know that we are not in and of Houston, right? So I think what we continue to ask and what we continue to seek as we, through partnerships like Microsoft Accelerate or through partnerships with great local organizations like Baker Ripley or the ION, how do we best understand and the dynamics in your education and labor market so that we can best align with the good work that's already happening and add value to the entire ecosystem, right? I think in all of the work that we're doing, particularly in markets where there's a real kind of a sense of existential questions about how do we sort of keep our communities resilient in the face of all of these rapid changes, and as there's the center of gravity towards the Bay Area, New York gets stronger in some ways, that helping entities like us, and it's not just us, right? It's Perscolas, it's Your Up, it's Merit America. There are lots of incredible national groups that are doing really great work on a regional basis, contribute meaningfully to the existing capacity and the good work that's happening on the ground, and close gaps without sort of creating confusion, given the rich experience you have, working locally and serving communities. I'm sure many of the groups that we're talking to have been in the mix for decades, right? And so how do we sort of bring those two capabilities together in a way that makes 1 + 1 = 3, rather than sort of seeing it as a zero-sum game?
Yeah. No, and it's been exciting to have you here, even though you're not here in Houston. I know you're enjoying New York right now, and probably nice fall weather. And I think we're in the 80s or 90s. But it's really been a pleasure to have you, Tom. And thank you for spending the time. We're looking forward to working with Gabby and the team here in Houston, but also know there's this great organization that sits behind it. And so we really appreciate the time today, and look forward to continuing that partnership to build the skilled talent Texas, and in particular Houston, is going to need, given Mary Beth's kind of opening comments in terms of how important the tech workforce is to Houston. And so I also want to now say thank you to our audience for participating in this UpSkill Works Forum series. And of course, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors that have been a part of this. Our next series will be on October 25th at 12 o'clock with Parker Harvey, the chief economist or principal economist for the Gulf Coast Workforce Board, where he'll be sharing, kind of dissecting the data and what's coming in terms of how do we come out of this in a different way. And a lot of the questions today were focused on data. So thank you very much for joining us today. We'll see you again in about 2 weeks. And once again, thanks to General Assembly and to Tom in particular for joining us. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's been a
Thanks,
pleasure
Tom.
for us as well.